Brian, your car weighs 3,100, 3,200?
3,800.
I'm 3,250 at the line. I think Brian's a bit lighter.
Race weight with me in it,
Well, welcome back, Eric. We appreciate you getting back with us. Last time was super interesting, and I ended up getting a bunch of feedback from people that had listened that I know. I'm not sure if you did too, but overall, it seemed like an interesting, productive combo. People appreciated hearing it. So.
It's funny because people say that they appreciate it, and then you're like, well, give us some questions for the next one, and then nobody has any questions. And they're just like, oh, you guys will figure it out. That's no problem.
It's like,
yeah, you guys can do it. Yeah, that's good.
Blank slate, whatever. But I think we end up navigating like whatever we're curious about, which ends up being what a lot of other people are curious about too. But something that I did want to mention, Eric, following up on last time, because we hadn't been in touch, and I need to make a confession here. I was telling the guys a little bit. We had talked about how maybe I was at the end of my shocks adjustment range, and we discussed going back in and doing some revalving. Well, I pulled them off the car to get them over to you, and I came to the realization that the last time I was out, I was turning the extension adjusters backwards, and I had gone the wrong direction on adjusting, and that was certainly contributing to what I was seeing. So I'm not sure how often you end up hearing of this sort of thing happening. I'm imagining it does happen, but that was I was surprised to find it, and it was a bit embarrassing.
No, it never happens. Yeah. You're the only one that's ever done that.
Oh, man.
So however you feel right now, that's perfect.
Yeah.
We get that a lot, actually.
Okay.
And, and that's part of the FAQs that we've tried to put up on our Facebook page and some of our web stuff. But the thing to remember, the valving is set up much like a bolt in a nut. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. As you're turning the adjuster clockwise, as you're looking down upon it, you're tightening up, or you're restricting more fluid, which makes the shock stiffer, and then the other direction loosens, the bolt, and it allows more fluid to flow. It's a little more technical than that, but that's kind of the basis for how that adjuster works. Where we get screwed up, though, is when you're upside down under the car.
I was just going to say that.
Or you're in a hurry, and you're like, okay, I just went over here, and then you crawl under the car, and you do this, and the next thing you know, you're 4 clicks opposite because you went 2 this way and 2 this way.
I'm just pit crew, and I wear a t-shirt.
But
Trev's going to be my shock adjuster this year.
That's the thing. We need to.
Oh, yeah. I'll send him straight to the wall, right?
Jesus.
Yeah. Well, and in fairness, different shock companies have their adjusters set up differently. Afco, for instance, is clockwise on the second generation shock. But now we started developing shocks back in 1996, carried that first generation shock through 2005. That's a shock that doesn't have clicks just to identify it. You have to use a pin or a punch or something to sweep across and make the rebound adjuster. That particular shock, you go counterclockwise on the extension or the rebound side to make the shock stiffer. Not many of those left in the market. Great shock, just not many left. The ones that click, it's always righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Always.
That's how my strange front suspension was. And it used to mess me up because I'd go to the back, and it's tighten, and then go to the front, and it's actually loosen, and then you're like, ugh.
It was the other way. Mm-hmm.
Didn't mess me up, but it was enough that you had to stop and think about it for sure. So.
Yep. No, it's a good thing to. It's a mistake that we'll never make again. I'm sure. One of those things. Like you mentioned it too, Eric, that having the shock mounted body up, which is how I have it in the rear of the car. Normally, I'd slide under the car on my back, make the adjustment on the extension adjuster, and it's straightforward, like you said, turning to the right. But I suppose if I slide in on my stomach, now I'm facing the other way, and I click in it to the right, now I'm backing off, and I'm sure that's what I did that last time out. anyway, we got to the bottom of it. So
You should write some little love notes in the white marker or
Yes.
whatever.
It's funny because I have that on my front shocks. I have it written on the front, up on the control arm. On the rear, I suppose I made an assumption. Learning experience. So that's my takeaway. Right on.
In the heat of battle, when you're thinking about making one more hit, or got past first round, but it really wasn't right, so I don't have a lot of time and I got a bunch of things to do, it's easy to go, the wrong direction.
So this episode, we're hoping to steer it towards no prep. There's big tire cars and there's small tire cars, and that's where, because I switch back and forth, that's where my problems exist lots of the times. Because my big tires, when they're set up, I'm pretty close to neutral, but it is still a little bit of squat. And then when I'm on small tires, it's extending. So everything for shock adjustments is backwards because you want it to squat. The other one, you want it to extend. So you're working the opposite side of the shock that way. So I don't know if we want to talk just about small tire stuff and assume that big tire stuff
Relates
is different
to it?
and it's kind of related.
It's different. Like I said last time, Eric, I was real selfish, and you gave me a lot of great info talking about the stick car on the small tire on the leaf spring, and that was self-serving, but also, like I said, a lot of guys I talked to, a lot of people running small tires and kind of stock style suspension, so it was relevant. But Brian, I think if
let's do this. First question for people that you like to help out with no prep setups on a big tire and a small tire. How do you like to set them up for squat or anti-squat?
Dangerous question, because that thing gets hotly contested every minute of every second a day that on the internet. But if it's a big tire car and we're no prep racing, my preference is to make the car squat. Okay, so and to kind of set this up in cause and effect mode, I'm going to start with the compression side of the shock, pretty soft, to help the car get down, to get down onto the tires, get down onto the springs to plant the tires. And we'd like to have a fair amount of percentage of squat into the car, but that's relative to the type of rear suspension we've got, how much adjustability we've got. And then I'll run the rebound fairly firm so that once the car gets down in the back, it holds it down, because we've seen from testing small tires and big tires, once the weight starts to roll to the front and we lose weight on the rear tires, you can knock the tire off in the back. So I'll run compression really light, especially if it's a back of the track kind of a thing, or when you get the call and they go, I'm no prep racing. As you guys know, the degree of no prep can be from a virgin piece of asphalt out there to
all the way up to no prep kings radio
prep. Right. Exactly. Which is a whole other interesting, side topic. But
yeah, we went to our first No Prep Kings race last year, and I don't know how the other facilities are, but Brainerd was like really good.
Yeah.
And they were like, we scraped. And I was like, you didn't scrape all that off.
They're all that way, and that's fine, because for the amount of investment that those guys have, you want to see a race. You don't want to see stuff torn up.
Oh, for sure.
A few years back, there was a track south of me about 2 hours. It was pretty cool. I don't know that it got to 50 that day. They went ahead and scraped it. It was a legit no prep race, and they wadded up 4 complete cars. I mean, done. Don't fix them, write them off, and 2 more were damaged. Nobody wants to really see that, and that doesn't bode well.
No.
The competitors aren't going to keep making donations to the racing gods like that.
Yep,
but
makes sense.
So we're going to run the car to squat, and what we're looking for with video or still shot, hopefully, as opposed to just someone's eyes and their recollection, is we want to see the tire wrinkle. We want to see this car get into the tire, and you'd like to see the wrinkle stay in the tire as it drives, maybe out of the camera view, because most people, again, we want to put the camera behind the car on an angle, and we want to see the tire and down the car a little bit. So you want to be able to see that the car kept the tire loaded all the way out. But let's say in the video, we make a hit, and we've got it juiced up pretty good. So we expect to make a good lick there, and it goes out and spins the tire. Now, you can just blame the racetrack and do whatever, tire pressure change or whatnot, or we could make a shock and or suspension change. So keeping in mind that shocks make a more fine tuning adjustment, whereas a linkage change makes a bigger change percentage wise to the performance of the car. So if we, in this case, let's say we've got a 4-link car and we can make an adjustment, and maybe all we do is lower the ride height in the back a little bit, which moves the instant center down, which is going to give us a little bit more squat. And you can, at that point, maybe soften up the compression a little bit more, stiffen, rebound a little bit more to keep the car down, and then make another hit and see how that affects, the performance of the car. And you, of course, hope that the racetrack surface is pretty consistent, but that's kind of the process. Is we've got to make a couple of passes, we've got to make some adjustments, and I talk to people all the time that dig in and they get after it with wrenches, and then I have people that want to talk about tire pressure and how we can add more weight to the back of the car. And weight's important. I talk with a lot of people, and you guys are probably the same way. We don't want to carry any more weight than we have to, but in what we're talking about here, rear percentage is awfully important. So it's not uncommon that we're carrying 54, 55% on the back. Does that make sense?
It does.
Absolutely.
It does. Absolutely.
I'm wondering what your
I didn't know that it would actually be so close. Like
that?
going 55% in the rear, 45 front.
That's-
Right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
And it kind of depends upon the surface. Obviously, if there's a lot of grip, you may not be able to get away with that much rear. It may want to carry the nose or whatever. But in a lot of cases, we have double adjustable shocks, or we've got good struts up front, and we can slow the front end down enough to not make it fly the front end and still get the bite we need.
What were you going there?
I was curious what your weight biases were on big tire.
Yeah, so on big tire with the aluminum block, I'm 53% on the rear,
Okay.
and that's without any weight in the car. And then with
You have potential to add more weight, right? In that
sorry,
configuration?
that was 53 was when I was nitrous, and then we went to that was nitrous with the iron block, and then when we went to the blower, we're 52% on the rear now
Okay.
with an aluminum block. Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay. Eric, I have another question then with regards to big tire kind of 4-link setup on like a low prep surface. In general, it seems like in this space, guys have the assumption that you kind of want as much front end travel as possible to facilitate the weight transfer. But is this really the case in general? Is there ever a situation where you are going to restrict front end travel a bit on a low prep situation? Like, can you, for example, get too much front end travel where now you've put the chassis in some unfavorable position?
Yeah, you can. You can end up with too much front end travel, which generates a wheelie, and you end up with a situation that the driver now has to make a decision: do I stay after it, or do I work the skinny pedal a little bit here to get the front end back down? And so it's common as I talk to people, they ask about long travel in the front end and how much travel is too much, and I think there's no one answer fits all scenario. Right. I'm seeing a lot of S10s. I'm seeing A bodies, first gen F bodies with, maybe as much as 7 inches of shock travel available to them, which those vehicles came with 4 or 5 inches from the factory. But we're seeing a lot of aftermarket kits in which the upper shock mount is extremely raised up to give us all this travel. I'm not sure that everybody uses all of that travel. They might, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear we've got limiters on the car too to try to keep the front end in check, and then we've got valving to do that. So it could be that they're getting that much travel. We talk with a lot of people that maybe only have 4 or 5 inches of travel in the front end and still get the job done. So interestingly, I think we've seen a couple of years ago with like the Mustang movement, I'd say in 21 and 22, early, a lot of people putting all the front end travel into these things that we can. I think I'm seeing a trend where it's kind of coming back a little bit. The 8-9 inches of front end travel that people were advertising or talking about is A, not necessary in a lot of cases, B, probably not the safest because the manufacturer of that strut didn't design it to have that much travel. And there's some internal issues in which you get a shock pulled out too far with that much travel, and it's you can have the strut. In this case, let's talk about the front strut. You could have the strut not go back in straight, and it kinks. Okay, and then the next thing happens is we wreck the race car because one side's still jacked up 5.5 inches, and the other side's settled all the way down, and we're up against the K barrier or whatever. So I don't necessarily have judgment on that, meaning people can tune their car how they want. But I think I'm seeing a trend to go back the other way and not have that 8 or 9 inches of travel. There's other ways to get the car to hook too. Again, keeping this in mind, we're all limited to what we can do in the back of the car. I mean, you've got to have the back of the car set up with enough adjustment to get enough squat if it's a small tire deal or a big tire deal, or anti-squat if it's a small tire deal. But if you can't get that, if you're fixed, CalTrack, leaf spring, my front eye is where my front eye is, then you've got to come up with other ways to make the car work. And front end travels, can be a pretty effective way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Just to circle back to squat and anti-squat, just so if anybody's listening, they know. So on a big tire car, when you squat, you're actually taking some of the pressure away from the tire. You're pulling it up from the track, right? Whereas when you extend, you're hammering the tire into the track.
Correct.
Have you ever ran into a situation where you have maybe too much extension or the timing's off on the rear extension where you can't transfer because it's trying to push the nose down?
Have you seen a situation where we had too much anti-squat?
Yeah. So the rear end is maybe fighting the weight transfer off the line.
I've seen scenarios where the anti-squat number was maybe a desired number, but the way they got there made the rear suspension move so violently that you couldn't control it. So you hit the tire with so much energy, you loaded the tire so hard so quickly that you bounce the tire. You effectively load that thing with too much force. Then we're talking about a sidewall that wants to rebound. It's a underinflated basketball, but it's still going to bounce. And so we could have a small tire car with 150% anti-squat rolled up and pre-staged next to the same anti-squat number, and the rear suspension could be identical. I mean, they could have the same exact torque boxes, and the rear end's got the same amount of holes and the same length, height, and still have two different IC dimensions, but still hit that 150%. And one car is going to perform better than the other because you need to load the tires in a fashion that they can accept the load, stay loaded, and get down the racetrack. So it's there's more than one way to get there. And so the way you get there, maybe the way you notice that is through video or data acquisition. Hopefully, if somebody's got a shock sensor, you can look at the graph and you can see how abruptly the shock opens up and how quickly the suspension moves. And if that line is nearly vertical, that's telling us either A, we don't have enough shock dialed in because the video tells us and the performance tells us the car bounced the tire, it didn't make a clean run. Given everything else is working in the car. I mean, there's a lot of factors that come into that. Wrong converter will make a rear suspension look stupid no matter what. So you've got to have all that in play. But when you get to that point, and you can watch some video, then you can see, okay, the rear suspension moved too quickly because the tire is not round. It's unhappy. and then we can start to dial in more shock. But if you end up running out of shock and still don't solve the problem, that might tell us our instant center point is too short, too aggressive, even though we're trying to get to this number of 150 or whatever it ends up being. So I see a lot of and talk with a lot of folks about anti-squat number with a small tire deal or trying to separate regardless of the surface. It's interesting when you ask about instant center length and height, that's not necessarily as well remembered as what that percentage number is, because we think 150, I'm just throwing a number, but let's say 150, that's the magic number. But again, there's more than one way to get there. And I think that's the key. Every car a little different because front to rear bias, wheelbase, tire, on and on and on.
I wanted to stick on the small tire anti-squat thing for a moment. Eric, I'm curious, so in a situation where you don't have the same adjustment, like you mentioned maybe a leaf spring Caltrack setup where you can't necessarily move that anti-squat further out or lower anything like this, how would you then approach slowing that down? Is this just trying to tighten rebound on the shock, or are there any other strategies maybe that you'd employ?
If the car is hitting the tire too hard with the leaf spring, the shock's is one of the primary things to slow that down.
Is there anything geometrically with the leaf spring setup that you can modify that might have that impact? Because I've seen some guys having different brackets, so I'm asking, where you may have different front eye mounts, or even the Caltrack bar position front and rear too, so having front and rear adjustment. I'm just curious if there's anything there that you might be able to comment on.
We see that a lot. On the rear mount on the housing, getting more angle in that bar generally gives us a little bit more drive.
Okay.
Raising the front eye on your leaf spring will give you more anti-squat, which that's a lot of work if you're going to move your front eye, up to generate that. So that's a little bit more work. Pinion angle. Right. I think we talked a little bit about pinion angle last time. The leaf cars, ladder bar cars tend to respond more effectively with pinion angle. So if we're attacking this combination with a pretty aggressive angle on the Caltrack type bar, we've got a bunch of pinion angle like is in 6 or 7, and we can't seem to slow the hit down. Shocks being what they are, we don't have enough control. We can start to pull some angle out of that bar. A couple degrees of pinion angle, we can take a little bit of that out. But that's really where an investment in a better set of shocks comes into play, because we'd much rather go to the racetrack with too much traction and then start to find ways to back it out. I may have told you before, but years ago I traveled with a modified Eliminator guy, 5-speed car, awesome car when it went down the racetrack, but we went there with just what we thought was barely enough traction, small cubic inch, high RPM. It didn't make a lot of torque, 282 inches, I think Chevrolet left at about 10,000, shifted it at 9,500. If it got a hold of the racetrack and dead hooked, we were done, So, but frequently we were chasing the racetrack, trying to find traction, and it was third qualifier before we finally got enough data maybe to put enough bite in the car. So that's completely different. Now we've got all this tunability, we've got all this torque, we've got all these things, all these tools in our toolbox. Let's go to the racetrack with a little bit too much traction, and then start to, free the car up a little bit.
Got it.
I'm so bad at asking questions.
Because your car works good. Mine doesn't, so I got all sorts of questions, Eric. So I got to be quicker.
Do we feel comfortable that we've discussed anti-squat and squat?
I think so.
Small tire, big tire. Do we need to?
Maybe we could go over a little bit more of the anti-squat in terms of the small tire, and really what the intended outcome is, because on paper, at least when I look at it, I'm watching a video of a car, and we see the car like we were talking about with a lot of front end travel. Clearly, this is going, if you had scales under the wheels, you're going to see the weight on the back tires, going up relative to the front. But of course, when you're moving a car down the track, it's not just this kind of static weight on the tire that's going to create traction. It's also the mechanical leverage, right, that the actual chassis is applying to the tire. So, and I think this is where the anti-squat comes in. So I was wondering maybe if you can describe a little bit how the chassis is working to apply, load to the tire, then traction as a result.
Okay, so in terms of, let's set the scenario up as a 4-link car, because it's easy for everybody to see a 4-link car. Let's set it up so that the bottom 4-link bars are uphill toward the front of the race car at 7 degrees. So we've got a bunch of anti-squat in the car. Instant center is short. Let's say it's in the 42 inch range. When we let go of the button, those trailing arms, because they're pointing uphill, are going to try to run, the forces are going to run parallel to those trailing arms. So it's going to pick up on the chassis. And while it's picking up on the chassis, it's driving down on the axle housing, because they're bolted to the housing, which loads the tires even harder. So you've got leverage from the 4-link driving the tire into the racetrack. And the harder you're trying to pick up on the mass, these aren't lightweight race cars. So you've got to, Brian, your car weighs 3,100, 3,200?
3,800.
I'm 3,250 at the line. I think Brian's a bit lighter now.
Yeah, we're lighter.
You're probably 500 pounds lighter than me.
I'm race weight with me in it. We'll just blur this out, but I'm 2,650.
I wondered if that was an answer you were willing to give.
Yeah, I'll leave it in there.
Just telling everybody.
Regardless, those arms are trying to pick up on that mass. And so it loads the tire. And because we've got a small tire, described as a small tire application here, we don't have the benefit of all that extra meat on the sides. And so you've got to force the tire into the racetrack. Unlike a big floppy, whereas if you try to drive a big floppy into the ground, all it's going to do is wad. It's going to try to drive over itself, going to get wadded up on the leading edge of the footprint of the tire, and then it's going to flop over itself, and you're going to spin, have to abort the run. Where the small tires, they don't have all that mass, and so you don't have to worry about them maybe driving over themselves quite like a big tire. But you still need to force those things into the racetrack. You've got to force them down to get traction. And so those trailing arms running uphill, the more it wants to drive out and up, the more it puts tire, the force of all that mass on the tire in the back. And that's really the magic, I think, in making the small tire work, is just, you've got to absolutely force that thing into the racetrack. You got to keep in mind, though, that it's got to be round, so tire pressure is real important. I think we've all seen more tire pressure than we initially thought we would have to run in small tires. So, initially I remember 10, 11, 12 pounds, and now I know it's a good bit more than that in a lot of cases when your car's heavier than 2,650. There is that. And then with that instant center behind the center of gravity height, we talk about a car. If you were to look at a car from a side view, it's helpful to understand the point in which the car would balance. Okay. And so if the instant center is behind that point, as we all have, most everybody has read or seen or in some form watched a program where it tells you that if the IC is behind the neutral line center of gravity height, it's going to separate in the back. The more that it wants to do that, though, the more it can drive the front end down, because it's picking up on the back of the car, trying to drive the front end down. I'll skip and just say that's how a lot of the radial tire guys are able to keep the front ends down now, because initially we had the instant center out a little bit further, and your picking point might have been under the shifter, under the converter, whatnot, and that just wants to pick the front of the car up and fly it. And then with all that horsepower, all it wanted to do was sail. We've now got the instant centers pulled back, and now we're driving the nose into the ground while we're picking up on the back of the race car. So what we see is the back of the car goes up, What you don't always see is how much load the tire really gets. And that's,
Right.
we may have talked about that last time. If we had a load cell under the footprint of the tire, man, from a data standpoint, you could learn so much from run to run. We can work on that though with the shock sensors, and I really would encourage, if we're pretty serious about what we're doing, shock sensors have become a lot more affordable. There's a lot of data to be gained from that, and you can learn. You can start to equate good runs, bad runs, how much travel I got, and then start to tune based upon that. And we go out and make a run, and we didn't make a good run, so we're going to look and see how much shock travel we got. Well, is that a result of the surface was not there, our power level wasn't where it should have been for that kind of travel, or did we have our shock set too stiff? Do we just need to soften the shock up given the conditions of the surface? And so there's a lot to be gained in that respect.
That's a good point. One thing there, Eric, that you mentioned was that the shock travel may change depending on the surface and how much power you can actually apply to the tire. And this was something that I noticed. Brian mentioned the No Prep Kings race that we participated in this past year. We had been at a race a week or two before that, our local event, and by all accounts, the Brainerd track is a kind of a high caliber track, and the car was hooking really well. And I was putting as much power as I had on tap to the car, and I saw way more extension at Brainerd than I did just at 2 weeks before at the exact same settings. And I guess it was just a matter of that, being able to apply more and more force to the suspension, and actually, ended up separating it further with all the same settings. So I wish we had time slips that weekend. I would have loved to know what the car ran there, because I think
I had time slips.
Did you? Oh, you.
I got the VPS.
Oh yeah. I need a fancier data logger this year, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we were at our local track the week before. That was the first
1
time
week
I ever
before.
put, 2 weeks or whatever. First time I ever put small tires on the car. And I think the best they were prepping it and everything. The best I could go was like a 530. And then we went to Brainerd and I went 479. Like
With the second tune-up?
just like nipping at the tune-up. Just,
Okay.
Yeah.
Big
For
runner.
for the exact same tune-up off the trailer, we went 515. So that was, and then we were like, oh, we could put way more in it. And we just kept going. So
Yeah, in cars that don't have a ton of horsepower, I've seen it go the other direction. You go to a track, well, even less,
Yep.
but just an NA deal, small inch NA deal, you can actually hook a car and drag the motor down,
Oh, yeah,
and go
absolutely.
to the racetrack and go slower just because we pulled it down out of its RPM range. So then you got to leave harder, maybe shift a little higher, do some things of that nature. But
Yeah.
it would be cool to see your G meter from the 2 weeks before to when you were at Brainerd and seeing the difference in which that how hard that car was leaving with the better surface.
I think that was a really good rundown on the anti-squat stuff and kind of the leverage created with suspension. And Eric, the point about the instant center, basically like the lift point, like the mechanical lift point of the suspension, how that relates to where the center of gravity of the car is. That's, like you said, a point that's not always emphasized, but obviously is really important when you're going to kind of anticipate what the change you're making is going to result in when you pull back up to the line. So, yeah, definitely interesting.
That's a point that really I think everybody, regardless of the type of racing, can consider. The point in which the car would, I'll say, teeter-totter, that's the heaviest point of the car, right? Because it's trying to pick up on the front and the back, regardless of where that is. And so if your instant center happens to be near there, that's going to be the heaviest point in which the car is not going to want to pick up in the back as much or pick up in the front as much. That may not be optimum for no prep style racing, but for those that are index racing, for those that are bracket racing, that can be a pretty consistent position to put your instant center, because the car does not make a lot of movement up. It doesn't wheelie.
Right.
So your lights become more consistent. It rolls out the same most of the time. And so when you know that, or you have an idea where that is, and you start to work your instant center around that, cars can pick up a lot of consistency to that. And you can look at the rear tire and see how much it's getting loaded. As you move the instant center forward, things do change. You don't hit the tire quite as aggressively, quite as hard, but it can be something that happens a little more gradual. You can take a car that might leave wheels up with a short instant center, move that unit. Let's just set it up. So 44 inches on a 108-inch wheelbase car. This thing's going to leave separating in the back, and it's going to look like it's jacked up a little bit there. Move that instant center out to 70 inches, and it's going to carry the front end up. It's going to twist. It's going to bury the right rear a little bit. It's going to really work the anti-roll bar. So there's a lot of things that you can do. A lot of ways you can screw your race car up, and I've done it. In one evening, this was a 100-inch wheelbase super gas car. I showed up at the racetrack at 44 inches, made a hit, and this thing left beautiful, left 2 feet in the air for 40 feet, came back, made an adjustment, 71 inches out the next pass. Left front was in the air 4 inches, right front never came off the racetrack. And the video showed the thing going down the racetrack. It buried the right rear. It was all just cause and effect on a test and tune day, but I just wanted to see how much of a change, really caused a huge change in the race car. So I went back and put it near where the center of gravity height was. And I think at that point it was around 46 inches or something. And I was maybe 8 off the ground, and it was a well-behaved race car, and it became consistent, because when you go from 44 inches to 71, your lights are going to be all over the place. Cars are going to roll out instead of come up, and you don't want that, when you're index racing or bracket racing. So there's a lot to knowing where your instant center is and where your center of gravity height is, and then tune your shocks around that too.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with my first question, because I think I'm pretty much right in the middle, like close to my center of gravity, because right now when the car launches on small tire, the front and the back almost travel at the same time. So it doesn't pitch back. Like the back end comes up as fast as the front end, and then it's probably like, I don't know, 200 feet out. Then the back starts tipping down, probably from the air over it with the wing, and then by the end of the track, it looks like it's a no prep car. Like the back end is down and the front end's way up. So
right.
But off the line, yeah, it just looks like everything just picks up at the same time, and it rolls out. But
yeah, it works good.
It looks weird too doing it. So.
But looking at the video of the rear tires, I assume they're loaded. They look to be very loaded, do they not?
Yep. Yeah, there's a good wrinkle in it.
Yeah.
I'm not folding it like I fold my big tires.
No.
But yeah, it's planted for sure.
And that's the thing, you want to see that wrinkle stay in the tire. Again, maybe out of camera view if you're filming from, a GoPro set on a little tripod next to the tire, or somebody's holding their phone and they're shooting down the side. A lot of times that's all we've got. I'll walk up to the starting line. I've got my phone, stand next to the car, and just try to focus on the rear tire. And if I can see that thing's loaded until you can't see it in the screen anymore, indication of pretty fair setup right there.
Yeah, my car usually works really good. The only time I'll ever have a problem is if it's like the very first pass on a no prep, or like a very poor surface before anybody else makes any passes. I'll make it probably 150 feet out, and it'll zip the tire. It'll like move over a little bit, and it'll zip it. And then you can leave everything the exact same, and if a couple people have made a pass, the next pass it'll go straight down. So yeah. I just got to figure out what causes that for my first pass, just in case we go off the trailer and we're against somebody, because I've had to pedal right there. But maybe we could roll into that of what are some causes and effects, like what your next move would be. Say you go to a low prep race, no prep, and the track is getting better. What types of changes do you think you'd be making throughout each round?
So in your scenario, let's start there. We're going to run off the trailer, and we're going to try to go A to B, and we're really going to get after it. If it goes out there 100 feet and zips the tire, I'd go back and look at shock data And again, I lean on that a lot, but I'd like to look at shock data because I want to see how much travel at that point. When the chassis let go, how much travel did we have? You could look at the G meter. You could look at your accelerometer, the drive shaft graph. And there's a lot of things you'd want to take into account. But at the point in which the tires let go, I want to know how do the key factors compare to a good run. Okay, and then if, for instance, we determine that maybe the shocks didn't have as much travel at that point, we didn't have as much dynamic movement in the suspension, we might soften up the rebound 2 or 3 clicks and go back out there and hypothetically make another off the trailer pass. But again, we'd be looking for something like that. I hate to say it, and you won't like it, but rear percentage. You might find that 50 pounds in the rear is what you need for an off the trailer hit. And then as the evening progresses, the track starts to get better. Pull the weight, start to stiffen the shocks up a little bit, because you can get too much travel. You can waste energy separating the back of the car if you don't need it. On a bolted down racetrack, we don't need 5 inches of travel necessarily. So in the first hit, first round, we go A to B, we win the round. Second round, we walk up, track looks better. We might start to stiffen the shocks up just a little bit and use that power to drive the thing forward. I don't know that we get so far as to make a linkage adjustment and take some of that anti-squat out. I think we just continue to clamp down on the shock to slow the rear suspension down so that we're not getting all that travel. And when you do that, you'll start to see 60-foot number improve. You'll start to see performance gained because we're not wasting energy.
That's part of my problem. Is I'll be like, yes, I won first round. On to second round, I don't want to change anything. It went good last time. And then I just, all night, I just leave it. And everybody else is slowly getting faster, and I'm just going A to B. And then eventually in the finals, it's usually you're racing the other faster guy, and he's been making changes all night. And you've been leaving yours the same, and then you're like, oh, hope I got enough in it. So
yeah. And let's not forget the front of the car, too, because the front's going to react. You hit this thing with that kind of power, we might need to stiffen the front extension up, soften or slow down the front end a little bit. Again, so that it does not come up. It loads the suspension, it loads the drive line, and you can waste energy by getting a car to wheelie, if you will, or leaving flatter is probably way more efficient than having the front end moving a bunch.
What I'm getting from all this is shock sensors seem to be the key ingredient to all this, right?
Oh yeah, shock sensors. I got them on my car. I'll show you some data later.
It really does help.
What is that? What does a shock sensor actually read? Is it like the initial hit or the entire pass?
It reads everything, the entire pass. It reads when you record, it will measure distance, which then equates to travel speed. So then now you can see how quick a shock moves. You can relate that back to shock dyno and whatnot. But these shock sensors are bolted to the upper shock bolt and the lower shock bolt, and so it's reading everything the shock's doing as it's pushing up to the water box, making the burnout, coming back.
Yeah.
You see everything, and then what you can do is you start to overlay runs and say, okay, I've got a good run here. How did this last one compare to my known good run? And then you start to see where you might have been a little deficient in this last run, and then you got to figure out why. Okay, I didn't get as much travel. Car didn't go as quick. Why is that? Track was good. I was a little less aggressive with my tune-up. Right. Or maybe I didn't have, I had too much shock, it was too stiff. And maybe excessively too stiff means we spun the tire because we did not let the rear suspension move fast enough. Traction, to me, is a relationship between how much force is on the footprint of the tire versus how much torque is trying to rotate that thing. So You've got to keep enough force on the tire so that it doesn't slip.
Beauty.
Seeing as we're talking about tires now, do you have
Any idea how to change a tire at the track?
no,
Because we have a video. Go on.
Is there a point where you know that you're supposed to be adding more tire pressure or less tire pressure versus making a shock adjustment? Is there like a baseline where you start out with tire pressure first or shocks first kind of thing?
Because I'm not a tire expert, I think, I would definitely defer and tell people, talk to your tire manufacturer and ask to speak to somebody that knows how much pressure to run for the type of racing you're doing, given the weight of the car. So once you've got a pretty good baseline of where your tire pressure is, then you can start to do the reconnaissance. Look at the video, look at your shock travel, start to determine where I'm at in terms of am I absolutely murdering the tire or am I not really getting into the tire? So not to say that the tire pressure is not important, because it is. It has to be right, but I don't think we want to chase too many variables there either. Mm-hmm. If you get to a racetrack and let's say we're loaded up with anti-squat, we're really planting the tire hard. We've been chasing the setup and we've been increasing the rebound or the extension control in the shock to slow the rear suspension down. And now we're out of adjustment. So now we're maxed out on extension control, but we're really still smashing the tire. Your option could very well be add just a little bit more tire pressure to keep the tire from folding over itself. The risk you run, I think, when you do that is that tire now becomes a little bit more inflated, and keep in mind a basketball that's overinflated bounces more than a basketball underinflated. So now we've got anti-squat. We're loaded up on anti-squat. We've got our shocks as stiff as we can make them, but we probably could stand a little bit, more control. We thought about adding tire pressure to the rear tires, and that may very well work, but you'll find you'll cross the line and now the tire will basketball. It'll bounce, when we hit it too hard. But in the heat of the battle, when you don't have a lot of time, you may not have the luxury to get the car up on jacks or whatever, and maybe pull a little pinion angle out or make an adjustment to the linkage to take a little bit of anti-squat out. As the night progresses, we don't have a lot of time, so you're just left with a couple of quick decisions, and away we go. You might put a little power out down low so that we don't whack the tire, load the tire quite so hard and bring it in. There's a risk, and we know what that is. If you don't accelerate the mass quickly enough and then ramp all that stuff in out there, there's a chance you zip the tire also, because we didn't get the mass moving fast enough, quick enough. So there's some, everything's a compromise, and you kind of have to know your race car a little bit to know what it'll stand.
You mentioned something a moment ago I wanted to circle back to about the shock sensors and data from the shock dyno, and kind of maybe making some correlations between those two things. Because from shock position, which is effectively what you're getting from your shock travel sensor, you can derive like your rate of change, right, from the second derivative of your shock graph. And I'm curious how you relate that to the forces and the shock dyno and kind of the info that you derive there. Are you making kind of like a direct comparison between the two, or is the shock dyno info more just to inform where you're at in the adjustment range?
A couple of ways to look at that. Mm-hmm. If we know how fast the shocks are moving on the race car, mm-hmm. then we can isolate the shock on the dyno to understand how much force of resistance the shock has on extension or compression in a window of range of adjustment. It's kind of like let's talk about dynoing an engine. If we've got an engine that we're going to work between 6,500 and 8,500, there's no reason to dyno that motor below 6,500. So if we kind of know where the shock's operating, then it helps to know where we can really focus on the shock dyno. From there, each click has a value, a percentage of change or a degree of change or pounds of change, because we rate shocks in pounds of force. So if you know, for instance, that our shocks are going to operate in a 6 to 12 inch per second range, we can then focus, in that area. And then you can start to look at how many clicks you have. So I've got, I'm 6 clicks from full tight on extension. So we look there, and if you're really zoning in on it, you can start to adjust the shock and maybe back it off 2 clicks. Now we're 8 from full tight. We see the amount of change in pounds. So you can start to record that and say, okay, that was 60 pounds of change. 2 more clicks is another 60 pounds. So you can go to the racetrack knowing that 2 clicks is 60 pounds, make a pass, make an adjustment. Okay, that was too much. So in that range, that 60 pounds of change that I made in the shock for that given scenario, the conditions that we just encountered, was too much. It made too big of a change in the race car. So you can back that off and maybe only make 1 click, or you can set your scenario up so that you have a baseline and you know where you are, and then depending on which end of the scale you're on in terms of shock adjustment, shocks on the softer end per click don't make as big of a change as on the stiffer end might be. So it helps to know where you're working, which end of the shock, and then it helps to know. It helps to know how much change you get per click, and that's getting up there. That's getting out to the fringe a little bit. It's not something that everybody does, and we have very successful racers that don't have that data, and because there are a lot of other tools in the toolbox too.
Sure. You mentioned one thing there that I wanted to ask about too, which was if the kind of click-based adjustment, if it's linear across the range of the force settings. You kind of alluded to that it's maybe not the case, but I was wondering if you could describe that a little bit.
Yeah, in terms of how these shocks operate, you've got a needle in a seat. When you've got the needle backed all the way out and you just put 1 click in, your amount of damping force might be 40 pounds. Okay. Each click is an equal percentage of change, not damping force, but percentage of change. So if it's 5% of 20 pounds versus 5% of 520 pounds, there's a bigger difference in that change as you get closer to the stiffer end of the shock. The whole key, though, is to understand what that means to the race car. It's not that the shock's not doing the same thing on either end. Percentage-wise, it is. It's just we're running a needle into a seat, along with some other things too. But from a tuning standpoint, it's important to know, okay, I'm working from 12 clicks to full tight on extension, and my car needs 2 clicks per change to see something show up. That's probably the key, and that's probably as far as it really needs to go. But we do have the capability of taking data acquisition data, downloading it, uploading it to the dyno, and we can bolt your shock on our dyno and watch it make a pass just like it went down the racetrack on our dyno. Now, what you can do with that is how creative we really want to go and be, and what we're trying to work on. But that technology's been out there. It's not by any means brand new stuff, and we've used it, and I think it's probably a little bit more effective in the circle track side of things than maybe drag racing. But we do have that capability, and that's pretty cool when you can see what a shock's doing either at Daytona, let's say, making laps in a cup car or going down a quarter-mile drag strip. It's kind of cool to see that. It takes a lot of work to get to that point. I'm not sure in the heat of battle on a average Saturday night on a less than ideal prep surface that information comes into play. I think at that point, it's gut feel, seat of the pants. I know what my car is going to do. I've got to put this much power into it. I've got to do this. And, oh, yeah, I got to let go of the button on time. So there's a little bit of tribal knowledge there that you just got to get in and do it.
Eric, I'm a physicist by training, so this is why I end up getting kind of down the quantitative rabbit hole and trying to be able to measure both sides of this. And if I know what the shock force curves look like, and then I can kind of infer what the forces applied to the chassis are based on like rate of change of the position sensor, then I figure I'd be able to just quantitatively dial in exactly what the settings might need to be based on that. But this is a whole other rabbit hole we can go down another time, maybe offline. That's, like I said, some of my own personal experiments, but yeah, very interesting anyway. So thanks for the insights on that.
There's a lot of good data. There's a lot of good programs that are out there. I think conversely, there's a lot of racers that have that tribal knowledge, gut feel, seat of the pants. They looked at the data. It's something to give them an indicator, but then you've got to get out there and do it. Mm-hmm. You've got to have the experience and go through that. So although I certainly think that technology and data is absolutely important, but you cannot replace experience and getting out there and making it happen.
Say the track or surface starts getting better, like too good, and then you start getting into tire shake. If you want to explain how tire shake happens and what the move to get rid of tire shake would be.
Tire shake is when we distort the tire. The tire's not round anymore. It wads itself up. It folds over itself. If you look at the footprint of the tire, it's not round. It's not flat. It's actually wadded up. And there's some really cool pictures online in which you see a fuel, like a top fuel dragster tire. It's on the leaf, nowhere near round. And if you look at the leading edge, it's all wadded up. It looks like you grabbed a Shar-Pei puppy from the tail and just wadded all its skin up to the back of its neck. Okay.
Yep.
I don't know how else to explain it, but now you have to drive over that hump. And when you do that, you get this shake. And then the tire is elongated, right? It's loaded. It snaps back. So it's got all this weird stuff happening. It's cupped. It's rolled over itself. The sidewalls are loaded excessively. And it's because we dead hooked the tire in a lot of cases. And you think maybe big tire first, but that's what happens, in a big floppy. If you see a pro mod, shake the tire, it's because they hit the tire too hard, or they tried to leave too low on power for the amount of traction that was available. So a lot of times, when we go to these races, it's really cool to see where guys will run radial tires and pro mods at the same event, because they have to go out and prep the track completely differently. Because if you just leave the thing bolted down, hooked up, you'll have every pro mod driver rattling their teeth and not making clean passes. So you have to have wheel speed. So the scenario could be that we've got too much bite dialed into the car for the amount of track that we have. And so maybe we can't get that out with shocks, because again, you can crank them full tight, but if they don't make enough change, you've got to make a linkage change. You've got to take bite out of the car. So generally, tire shake is a lot of times because we've overhooked it, we've loaded the tire, we've dead hooked it, and it's not round, and it's folded, wadded, and wrinkled up like a Shar-Pei puppy.
That was my Saturday at NPK.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah. Friday was good, and then Saturday everybody was still making passes, and it got way too good. And I'd make it like 100 feet out, and it would shake its brains out for 200 feet, and then it would clean up or whatever. And so that was my first.
So let me ask you a question. What did you do to fix it?
I just kept making passes.
Just kept driving over the tire.
Ignored all data and just...
Yeah, eventually I got outrun. With my
how much tire pressure did you have?
We were 12 3/4.
Okay.
So probably more tire pressure could have helped keep it round, I'm assuming.
Tire pressure would have helped.
Yep.
Probably. That would have helped stiffen the sidewall up a little bit. I mean, do you run tubes in your tires?
No, just a stiff sidewall.
Okay.
Just the normal Mickey Thompson.
I mean, in an extreme situation, if you could have wrinkled your nose and put a set of tires on there that had tubes in it, that'd have stiffened the sidewall up. That would have helped without necessarily adding more tire pressure and causing them to bounce a little bit. Stiffen the compression up a little bit to slow that down a little, get some wheel speed in the car.
Okay.
It'd be cool to see your drive shaft graph on a good night versus that night in the first 60 feet. You know, I bet you were down a little bit because it was pulling the motor down a little bit.
Right.
Those are just some things I think I would have looked at and tried to tried to adjust with maybe leaving a little harder. I don't know if you can leave a little harder. If you've got the tongue hung out on it, you probably have a little more power than you need on the starting line anyway, doesn't it?
We were actually, we could leave a lot harder, because that was our second time on small tire when we went there.
How comfortable, Brian, are you in sharing this information?
I'm fine. If anybody takes the time to listen to our stuff, they can have all my information.
Okay.
Yeah. He's transparent, pretty transparent.
Oh yeah, I tell everybody. Lots of people, for some reason, don't believe me when I tell them stuff.
That's the best part of it.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, Brian, where you make your gear change. So we're talking about shaking the tire, and also when you zip the tire like 100 or so foot out, where are you making the 1-2 gear shift?
Well, that was the other thing too, because when we were at No Prep Kings, that we had the trans brake button that when I would make the 1-2, it would start the launch curve again. Mm-hmm. It just I had like a slow release button for bracket racing that I left in the car to use for when we back up because the pro brake, because it's just easy to use. But every time we figured it out later, every time we would shift, that button would just click the micro switch by a hair, and the Holly would think that I let go of the trans brake again, so it would rerun my launch curve. And we never noticed on big tire because my launch curve would be like maybe 5 degrees. So it would be like almost a normal shift retard. And then on small tire, we were pulling like 12 degrees over a second and a half. So we'd make the 1-2 and it'd just go, just start taking off.
I was curious if that was around where it would shake the tire.
I can't remember.
Curious to see. We'll have to pull up some data logs.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting if it fell off the tire and started to wad there a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. I lost that race by a fender. So.
Yeah. Might have been enough.
You lost that race by a ball.
Could have been the ball and the tire shake. Yep. Live and learn though.
Yeah. Awesome.
So that button's gone. It's just a normal button there now.
Yeah.
With a really hard spring in it.
Yeah. Well, Eric talked about what Trevor's got to look for. Mm-hmm. And this whole thing is everything Trevor has to do at the track for me now.
Yep. I like this stuff. I just don't know anything. When he opens up his laptop, it's like, yeah.
Trevor's job's the most important job out there anyway. He's the eyes and the ears. Letting go the button's not that bad. Trevor, you've got a really critical job there. Mm-hmm. So
I do.
True, and we tell him all the time.
For the one race that I actually attend.
Well, it's kind of teasing, but in seriousness, what you can get in feedback if you don't have a car that's fully equipped with data comes from your crew guy. And from experience, I talk with a lot of people that will tell me what they've heard, and maybe you're working back and forth 2 or 3, 4 weeks in a row, and then you finally get to see some data, and you find out that maybe the information that he was receiving isn't as accurate as it needs to be. So the person that's watching the car that's offering help probably ought to be somebody that knows what's going on, a little more intimately involved in the race team than just someone that's standing next to the water box and the fence. Love everybody that comes to the track, but keep in mind the data that you get, you need to verify and qualify and quantify it, because if you don't, what you're hearing may not be accurate. For instance, we could all roll into to a track here in 3 or 4 weeks, stand there on the starting line and just listen, and you'll see people that go, man, that car, look at that thing. It squatted in the back. That thing it was just awesome. When in fact, shock data showed us something completely different. But by our eye, we didn't see that for 0.3 of a second, the shock went into extension that planted the tire. Then the front end rotated back, and the shocks then came down. So that kind of information, word of mouth, or man, I just saw your car and it did this. If you don't have video anymore, it's tough to really sink teeth into it.
Yeah, the squat extension thing at the line is a big thing, because if you crush the tire, it looks like the car squatted just because the rim dropped to the ground. And a lot of guys will be like, oh yeah, it squatted. And then you go back, you watch a video, and you see the fender and the rim got farther away, but the whole car dropped towards the track because you crushed the tire. So that's true. I've seen that for sure.
Yep. If you've got a 1432 or something big with a lot of sidewall and it squats, man, we pounded that tire. We squatted that thing. Okay.
Yeah, you get multiple camera angles from the pit crew.
Oh yeah, we get good video all the time.
Yeah.
I just never have time to look at it in between rounds.
Yeah, that's the thing. Data overload between the rounds, and it's not till the week after watching all of it back we make all the big breakthroughs.
Data can be confusing. Absolutely. Working with a guy at a racetrack, a madman comes into the back of the trailer, and I may have told this story before, but a guy comes into the back of the trailer, and he's absolutely animated, and he's got a smile on his face, but he's loud and he's fussing and cussing and carrying on. What happened is he just installed his data acquisition before that event. He was 2 passes in this weekend. He was so damn confused he couldn't figure out which way was which, and he was bitching at the guy who I was working with because he sold him the data acquisition. He said, you can have paralysis through analysis, and at some point that's not a good thing. But if there's a way to find a little time to take a look at something, obviously that is better if you can. But if the schedule's such that you've got to do all the maintenance on the car and get it turned around and get yourself ready, it's hard to look at data and get prepared and make an adjustment. Sometimes it's just a shotgun approach. Here's what I think I felt. Here's what I think I need to do based on what I know.
Yeah, I learn a lot after we get back, and I look over everything, and like a week of just like looking over data and watching videos and stuff, and then I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to make this change for next time, and then usually I'll make bigger changes, and then we go out, and then once the car works, it usually just kind of stays, and I'm trying to make little changes, but yeah, where we are isn't the best. I wish we had a track closer that we could just go do 4-link bar changes and just keep testing and everything, but...
Well, what you just said is important, and I think, I started out bracket racing, and your ideal there is to make the car run the same thing every time, so you really don't want to make a lot of changes if you don't have to. Maybe just we're tweaking the front tire pressure to get dialed into the tree, or we're making a box change to get in, a rear tire pressure change. But past that, if we're first to finish line style racing, it's important to put the time in. And if you can't put the time in that evening, to what you said through the week, it's important to digest all of what you just gathered, because that's valuable. And whether you're consciously thinking about it or not, you're learning, you're picking up on things. You're going to see a tendency in the car. If you continue to get after it and stay after it, you'll see, well, now I've for the last 3 races, I've done this to the car, whatever this might be, and it didn't respond. So ultimately, I need to not do that, but try something different. And so it's way important to do the homework in between events and try to figure out, tendencies, trends. Here's what seems to work. Here's what doesn't work. Here's when the car is happy. Some graphs. Here's when things aren't good, and then start to, put a game plan together. If this happens again, what am I going to do? Am I going to do the same thing again and expect different results? We hope not.
I feel like you were targeted in this conversation.
No.
You figure it out.
That's all right.
Are you going to do the same thing again,
No,
Brandon?
no, I'm not. No, I am not.
Sorry.
And some cars have less adjustability than others, so it's a little more challenging to make some changes, in a car where there's not a lot of holes to work with. Working with a guy a couple of weeks ago at a PDRA race, we were, he brought the shocks over, said, I'm rattling the tires. I want to make sure I don't have a problem. So we started to talk about the car and, start at the front, work to the back. And by his own admission, hey, I've got an old style 4-link in the car. I've got 3/4, big holes here. Distance is too far apart. I can't get really where I want to get to. So sometimes you're limited on what you can really get to. And you've got to, in that case, you couldn't move a bar. So you had to change ride height a little bit to kind of finesse this thing to where it needed to be. And it all started because Trevor was paying attention to what was happening on the dyno.
Yeah.
There you go.
Every single time.
Made the right call.
I mean, that's what friends are for, right? So
It's true. It's true. Credit to you, Trev.
yeah.
Thank you. We're glad to have you
Anytime.
back. Yeah,
Anytime.
yeah. Awesome. And thank you, Eric. This is it's been
This
great
is all
again.
good info.
Very insightful, and I really enjoy the conversation. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's good to talk about this stuff. I enjoy it. So hopefully we can continue on and look forward to coming back on again sometime.
Awesome.
For sure.
Man. Yeah, and hopefully too soon we'll actually have some maybe more current relevant stuff to talk about. But if our weather will cooperate and the snow will be gone and get to some testing, that's what we're looking forward to.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the testing will help with cause and effect, because I think that's where we can learn an awful lot about what, Brian can talk, or you can talk about what the car did, and then what possible changes could we have made, and run through some of that stuff. And then, to me, that's where I think I learned more than anything is hands-on doing it, making them. I've learned more making mistakes than I think I ever have getting it right by chance. So that to me is the real nugget here is getting in the lab and getting out there and doing it, and then talking about it.
See what happens. Awesome.
And
Well,
if we did that, maybe we'd actually stumble onto making our cars faster.
Yeah, that's
Right.
the plan.
Crazier things have happened.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again, Eric.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been great,
And,
man.
Yes,
Yes,
guys.
sir. It was good meeting you.
Yeah. Good meeting you too, Trevor.
Thank you.
Awesome. And maybe we'll talk a bit more offline sometime about some of the shock dyno stuff and some of the
Yeah.
forced travel things. So
Absolutely. Give me a call. If you get a chance, you've got my number, or
Oh yeah.
Brian's got my
yep,
number. But
yep.
yeah, just give a call, anytime, and we can talk about it.
Awesome. Let's do it. Great. All right.
And everybody else can call Eric at Afco and buy some shocks.
Here's his phone
true.
number right here.
Here's his home phone number. Here's his cell phone.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Great.
Sounds
All right,
good.
Eric. Thanks
Thank you,
again.
Eric.
Take care.
Okay.
We'll talk soon.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.